Celebrated actor and my dear friend, Jamison Stern. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood. Today's guest is a lifelong actor who works constantly and puts everything he has into his characters. From one-man on-stage triumphs like his recent Fully Committed to full-body transformation such as his turn as Tracy in The Legend of Georgia McBride, Jamison commands an audience. His current role as Paul Number One in the Emmy-winning Amazon series After Forever is particularly special, as it's clear that the cast loves each other as much as the characters do, and audiences fall in love with a slice of New York that is unique and familiar at the same time. Jamison also has a gorgeous singing voice. Just enter Jamison Stern into a YouTube search, and you'll find songs from Stephen Sondheim to Julie Stein. This is a good time for me to mention that Jamison is spelled with an I, Jamison, and Stern is spelled exactly how you expect. It was important to me to have Jamison on the show because he's so clearly doing the work. Being an actor is hard, and he has put in years. He's been working since he was 14. So for those of you out there who really want to do this, who want to be an actor, who want to come to New York, Jamison can offer insight into the persistence, tenacity, and resolve required to make it as a performer. And it doesn't hurt that he's one of the kindest souls I know. Jamison Stern, welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm going to get a copy of that and use it as my bio from now on.
Do it, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I spent the weekend binging After Forever.
Oh, thank you.
And it's one of my favorite things about the new era of online streaming television is that you don't have to conform to a 22-minute episode or a 56-minute episode that fit into traditional TV. After Forever has episodes that are from 8 to 14 minutes long.
Yeah, you can binge each season in about 90 minutes.
Yeah, and you can binge both seasons in the length of like a long movie.
Exactly.
And it actually sort of feels like a long movie, except that every 10 minutes you get this little cliffhanger or, special moment like that makes you like you have to keep watching the next one.
Michael Slade, the writer, who is amazing, and Kevin Spiritus, who is co-creator and co-writer, they wrote them as one long, like a movie, and the year before we shot season one, we did a sort of a stage, like just a reading of the whole first season for investors, and it was amazing. And I remember walking away from that going, well, that's just never going to happen. It's like too expensive. It's too, there's a lot of sex. There's a lot of whatever. And I thought, oh, this is never going to. And a year to the date, Kevin Spiritus calls and says, so which Paul do you want to be? And I was like,
Number one,
hello.
Okay, so for people who haven't watched After Forever, which I should say has how many Emmys?
5.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is it about? What's your elevator pitch if people are like, what are you working on right now?
So it's hard to talk too much in detail because there is a big spoiler. And
there's a major twist at the end of episode 1, and I was watching this with a friend, and we were like, whoa, what? Did that just happen?
It's so funny, and I love that. And I get text messages and phone calls all the time about it, and I don't think about it because I always knew, and I never realized that it was a surprise to people, and I just love it. But really, it is something we haven't seen. It's just a slice of life of gay men and women and friends of theirs who are in their 40s and 50s, and we don't really see that on TV. And it's just also about, After Forever means what do you do after the thing that you thought you would be doing forever doesn't happen. And so it is about a man, Kevin Spiritus' role, who has to go on after something happens between him and his lifelong partner. And I play his best friend who's just, we all try to help him move on and help him have fun. I'm the one who tries to help him have fun and lots of inappropriate sex.
There's a lot of tough love from some of the friends, but each one has its own role. It reminds me of like any, or I should say, it has in common. Shows like Friends or, any one of these shows that centers around a group, a core nucleus of community, and each person in that community has their own unique personality. And you're right, this is the first time that I remember seeing men of a certain age, as you might say. And of course, it occurs to me, and especially having just seen The Inheritance on Broadway, that there is an entire generation of gay men that that we've lost so many of.
Yeah.
That there aren't that many, not that there aren't people out there. I mean, they're out there, but the whole community was decimated, and almost an entire generation was lost.
Yeah. And, I will say the one nice thing, maybe nice isn't the right word, but, AIDS is really not an issue in our series, but it's all based on a true story. This is Michael Slade's real life story.
Really?
Yeah. And so there are times on set where, I forget it's a drama because I'm only there to crack the jokes, and then I get phone calls from like girls I went to high school with who are, I'm sobbing. I can't believe, you should have warned me. And I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, it's sad. And,
but it is also so funny.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
There are moments of real, I wouldn't even call them downers, but like introspection and gravity is, I think, the best word. But I was laughing a lot.
Well, thank God. Thank you. But, there were times, especially during season 2, where I would look over, when the camera wasn't on me, I would look over at Michael and I would just start crying, thinking about the fact that this is his life, and especially, there's a memorial, we'll say, in season 2, and that was a really hard day.
I bet.
And I've never experienced something like that in my life. And then I just went home and cried for hours. And I mean, that's not a shock since my friends call me Boohoo Jamie, but it's true. It's true. Ever since the 90s, that's been my nickname. But it's great. And, and yes, we won 5 Emmys, and no one expected it. We shot it as a tiny little web series. We thought maybe it was going to go on YouTube, or we would just be off our own site or whatever. And then it was picked up by Amazon, and then we got nominated for 8 Emmys, I want to say, and won 5. We could have won 6. Nita Gillette, damn it, she was robbed. But it was just like as it is in the movies. I mean, you run on stage with your cast, and someone makes a speech, and of course I
cried.
I did, but so I'm obsessed with Sunny Hostin from The View, and so when I found out we were going to the Emmys, I tweeted at Sunny Hostin, being like, I'm in a show nominated for the Emmys. Will you be there? I want to meet you. And I immediately get this reply, see you there. And the months leading up to it, I would occasionally tweet her and be like, can't wait to see you at the Emmys, can't wait to see you at the Emmys. And another girl in my show, Erin Cherry, equally obsessed with Sunny Hostin. So we are at... the Emmys are 2 days, the creative Emmys where they announce 7 of our nominations, and then the full-time real Emmys the next 2 days later where they do Best Series. And we're sitting there at
Don't call it the real Emmys.
Well,
that's so dismissive of all the other ones.
Okay, crap. The televised version. Jeez, I'm gonna get such crap.
Nah, I'm just
That's
kidding.
All right. But
I mean, they do that. Like if you talk about who has an EGOT, sometimes people are like, I mean, she just has a daytime Emmy, as if that's
I know.
a technical Emmy.
Exactly.
It's like, you know what? You win one, you win one.
Exactly. You
You have that winged goddess in your office, your apartment.
And they are so beautiful too. And they are very heavy. But so we're standing, we're out on this big patio for the pre-show party and cocktail hour, and Sunny Hostin walks by, and Erin grabs me, and we run over, and I said, "Hi, Ms. Hostin. My name is Jamison. And she was like, "You're the one. They told me about you." She's like, "I don't really handle my Twitter very much, but yeah, they told me all about you. They said some guy who could be crazy, but he is nominated for an Emmy, so maybe he's not." And, we hugged and took pictures and whatever. And the crazy, amazing thing about it was she was the only person from The View there. So it was totally just meant to be.
I think you should use that as your bio. Some guy who may be crazy, but he is nominated for an Emmy.
That's funny because it's true.
I would love to see that in your bio. Speaking of bios, yours is really interesting. How did you start working professionally at 14?
Well, it just happened. My dad had been an actor, but he passed away when I was 13. And that's about the age where I started getting into it. and there was like an acting school. My dad lived in Manhattan, in Chelsea, and my mom lived in Jersey. And there was an acting school in Paramus, in the mall.
Of course, it was in a mall,
right? And so somehow I auditioned for this production of George Orwell's 1984, and I was 14 years old. Now you can all do the math, and it was going to New York, and so I did my first off-Broadway show at 14 at that time it was called the No Smoking Playhouse on 45th, and now
every theater is the No
Smoking Playhouse. Well done, well played. I forget what it's called now, but so that's how it started, and then I went to Stage Door Manor, like the rest of the Stage Door Mafia.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, people who have listened to the Eric Bergen episode of this podcast or this live radio show, I always feel the need to put in a plug for the live version of the show, which you can access by going to dnrstudios.com/Laura. For a mere $6.95 a month, you can hear the show live.
And it's worth it. I binged last night, and I have to tell you, I actually started with the Eric Bergen show because we're such good friends. And
do you go back to Stage Door Manor? Did you go at the same time, or
we did not go at the same time. He's younger than I, but when I was back there for a tribute to one of our teachers, not our mentor Michael that he was talking about, but Jack Romano, our other mentor. I met him, and that's when he was a camper. He was probably 16 or 17, and I don't know. But I was binging your shows last night, and my God, you are just so good at this. I am a podcast addict. I listen to podcasts all day and night, and I have a dream. If anyone wants to, me to do a podcast with, I want my own podcast. But I listen to the people who ask the great questions and really listen to what their guests are saying and have the ability to talk about what their guests are saying and know everything. You're just really good at it. Dax Shepard is amazing at it. You are amazing at it. Mark Moran is amazing at it. Very few people can do this and talk about anything and have something to add to it. I listened to your interview with Telly just this morning, and
Telly Leung,
yeah, and you knew exactly what he was talking about, and you knew how it was great. You explained what phonate is to the world.
Well, thank you, Jamison. This is really what I feel like my wheelhouse. I love talking to people because I love hearing their stories.
Yeah.
And I feel like we all really are, like I referenced in the intro with you, like we're all doing the work. We're all trying to get better at what we do. And you can't end up with an acting career, or I should say especially a stage acting career. You can't end up there by accident. It takes a lot of work, and often, especially in the age of social media, we don't see that. And so I just want to hear people get vulnerable. And I really think that it's the guest who does all the work. And yes, listening is important and asking follow-up questions is important. But there was a time, and it still sometimes happens, when I would get really nervous. Like, what am I going to ask next? I forgot what I prepared. And at some point, I just heard myself, like in my head, something told me, your guest will tell you what your next question is supposed to be.
Yeah.
All you have to do is listen for the cue and then say, even if you say, tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, we all forget to listen because we all want to tell our own story, and it can happen in acting too, if you're in a scene with 5 or 6 people and you don't have necessarily, if it's not directed properly, everyone sees the scene from their point of view. And so they're trying to get their point across, and it becomes like an episode of The View, everybody talking over each other. Like, I always like to bring it back to The View. That's where I get all my news.
Oh God!
But it's funny because it's a little true. But yeah, you just have to listen.
I think they say acting is listening.
Yeah.
And even if you're in a 2-person scene, or maybe even if you're in a 1-man show, it's about listening and reacting. And I think, where I failed as an actor was, and I stopped after college. I didn't really pursue it beyond like some TV commercials, which I don't really even consider acting. Different craft than being on stage. But I would always be like, what's my next line? What's my next line? What's my next line? And was completely disconnected with what the other person was saying and what they were feeling and meaning in that. Because so I might get my lines right, but I wasn't having a genuine reaction. And so, what you and I do for a living is not all that different.
Yeah, no, not at all. And the best advice I can give to anyone when it comes to, especially auditioning, is just know your lines. Just memorize the lines, because God willing, you're going to have a reader who is an actor, and you're just going to react off of what they do. Especially with TV and film, just memorize the lines. Don't make any plans. Don't, you can come up with a little shtick here or there if it's appropriate, but you shouldn't have to do anything but know what to say.
So I know that you're really good at auditioning, and here's why. It doesn't take that much Googling to find a bunch of your self-tapes.
Oh, shit.
So I spent the morning watching you audition for projects I've never heard of.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to do some cleaning up.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like on Vimeo, I guess.
Yeah, Vimeo. I mean, I just literally Googled Jamison Stern, and the first thing it did was ask me if I meant the Jenna Jameson interview on Howard Stern.
Right. Yes, of course. Because I do porn in my spare time.
As a woman, no.
Right. Yeah. It could happen.
It's all about spelling Jameson correctly, I think.
Jamison.
Okay, I'm gonna see what I can just pull up right now. I'm Googling Jamison Stern.
I'm sure I'm in a dress.
Vimeo. Nope.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can find. There was one that I really liked this morning. Okay.
Is it the one for? Hi, I dated. Okay, all right. We were more like fuck buddies. We fucked twice. 3 times. Wait. Does it count as sex if you don't come?
This is not safe for work
He
episode.
waltzes in, baby in hand, with his wife. And she was like, can I see something in a size 4? And I was like, well, don't you mean a size 8? And she was like, well, I really like a size 6. And I was like, I'll bring you a 10 and we'll take it from there. I just can't stand it. Where? Dude, these people get their expectations from me. He's so hot. Remember? And the baby boy or girl, I mean,
This is 5 minutes long.
Can you imagine what that baby would think if he knew what his father was doing last week? I don't want to talk about it, okay? Do you know that I have no idea what this is?
Well, you uploaded it 3 years ago. It's called Untitled. And yeah, you were auditioning for something called, let me see. If I go back to the beginning, there's a little, you were auditioning for someone called TJ.
Some movie, I guess. That's hysterical.
Yeah,
I guess I didn't get it.
You got to be careful what you put online, especially if you don't make it a private.
It's so funny, too, because I have come across other people's self-tapes, and I think, oh, how stupid. These people need to keep this stuff offline.
Well, you live, you learn. But it taught me something. I mean, I have not watched a ton of self-tapes because, I don't know, like, why would I? I'm not a casting director. But I do think there's an element of being like, oh, this is sort of silly. Like, this person's having a conversation with no one. They are really, really into it, like super emotional. And in a way, it's easy to be like, oh, it's so self-involved. And I'm not talking about you in general. Yeah. I'm just talking about, self-tapes. But then I have seen a few self-tapes of people who got the jobs. And it's like, oh, it's just the same as the people who didn't get the jobs. They're taking it really seriously, talking to nobody, directly to camera, and that's how you get work. And I feel like it almost makes me want to start auditioning again, because when I was auditioning, it was like in the 90s, and there wasn't such a thing as self-tape. I mean, I guess there was if you had a VHS recorder.
Right.
But I only auditioned for things live in the room.
No, self-tape has become like the thing, and I think it's the bane of every actor's existence, because first of all, you have to get a friend because someone else has to
God
speak
knows,
the lines.
finding a friend is the hardest. I'll come read with you.
All right. But I even have a friend, my best friend Mia, who she's figured out a way where if she can call me and I read the other lines through the phone. When she does a self-tape, I still don't know how she does it. She has to explain it to me. But it's an interesting thing. Self-tape, at least you have control over it. But what you lose in a self-tape is your personality in the room, which is something that I feel I have a gift for Gab. I mean, I remember years and years ago, I was with a different agency at the time, and my agent got some feedback and said, oh, he was great. He goes, but God, he just wouldn't stop talking to us. And I heard it, and I took it in, and I thought, oh my God. And it made me feel bad about myself. And then I went to LA, where all you do is sit and talk, and you almost never even get around to the sides. I've sat in auditions in LA where we talk and like, oh, you're from New York, tell me this, and oh, you've done this play and blah, blah, blah. And then by the time they're like, oh, you don't have to read the sides, just come in on Wednesday and meet, the producers and whatever. So at least I found, that the gift of gab can, come in handy.
I definitely have that same thing. Whenever
Yeah.
I'm applying for any kind of job, I'm always like, just get me in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if I don't have any experience. They're gonna.
It's really true.
First impressions it's a hard skill, but when you've got it, you got it. In fact, I was doing social media for a film, totally behind the scenes, and I went to cover a talkback that the cast was doing, and the casting director was there, and he met me, and he was like, do you do any acting? And I was like, well, I mean, I have. I used to. I'm open to hearing what you have in mind. And he said, oh, well, I'm casting this movie that where I need a reporter, and I feel like you'd be really good. And I was like, oh, I used to be a reporter. And he was like, okay, well, come in. He gave me a slot. I hadn't gone into a casting director's office in like 20 years. And it turned out it was somebody who's going to be on a red carpet talking to a mixed martial artist. And I was like, I've literally been at the UFC on the red carpet interviewing fighters.
Oh, come on.
I read the sides, and I think I did fine in the sides. But when I introduced myself to the casting director, I was like, it's so funny because when I read this description, it was like, I've actually done this. And after I read the sides, he was like, can you just tell that story to direct to camera about your experience with this? And I'm positive it was that got me the role.
Yeah.
By the way, I just Googled it because they changed the name of the film so many times. Apparently, it was released in 2019, and I had no idea. It's now called Above the Shadows.
I'm sure there's a big check coming your way.
Well, part of my no, it was I was paid. It was just a one, non-union one.
One and done.
But I do know that part of my contract was I was supposed to get 2 tickets to the premiere.
Oh, crap.
So I'm going to have to look up Above the Shadows and where I can stream that and see if reporter number 2 was cut.
Made it in.
By the way, I've become obsessed. I shouldn't be, but I've become obsessed with the ratings people give Laura Heywood Interviews, the podcast. You're not supposed to read the reviews,
No.
but I just want to do work that is worthy of 5 stars. I even
Yeah.
got this special link that's called ratethispodcast.com/Laura, so people can just go there easily to give it a rating. You don't have to
that's so smart.
find the podcast, click through, whatever. So ratethispodcast.com/Laura. But one person posted, just let your guests talk. Stop talking about yourself. And it broke my heart. And I just was like,
that's very Alec Baldwin of you. But anyway.
That it broke my heart?
No.
Oh, that
he's one of my favorite podcasts, but he does like to talk a lot. But
Well,
you
look,
don't.
I do. I named the show after myself. People have a relationship with me, and they follow like what's going on in my life, and they want to know a lot of people want to know. They listen because it's like each episode stands alone, but it's also serialized in the sense that I do talk about my own experience and my own past, and I am in conversation with my guests. We both talk. I like having people like you who are my friends in real life because we have chemistry, we have a rapport, and we have stories that when I share something, it brings up something that you can then share. And to me, I ultimately unbroke my own heart by saying, yeah, that person just prefers a different style.
Exactly. And, reviews, I used to read reviews all the time. I mean, I still do, but, they say, if you're going to believe the good ones, you have to believe the bad ones. So how can you believe any of them? But I have my favorite story about reviews, and I can't believe I'm saying this to the whole world, but all my friends know this story. So I made a bit of a career for a few years in my, actually way too old to be doing it, in my mid to late 20s, playing Huckleberry Finn in Big River at a bunch of theaters over the course of about 3 years. And the very first time I did it, I got a phone call the morning after opening from someone saying, don't read the reviews. And of course, then you're like,
oh my gosh.
holy shit, how bad could it be? So I went to the oldest woman in the show, and I said, talk to me like I'm your kid and tell me, because I've built up this terrible thing in my head. And she said, no, they're just not, the reviews aren't good for the show. But I would say, just avoid them till we're done. And I felt better. And then, back in the day, this was in the 90s, but, then you get a package of reviews about 2 weeks after the show closes that comes in the mail to you.
Why?
Well, because many actors want that, I guess. And this was way before social media. Mm-hmm. And so I get the reviews, and I was skewered. Like 4 out of 6 reviews were so horrible. I mean, with headlines like Big River miscast. Yes. And the best bad review of all time was no matter what the program says, Jamison Stern is not Huck Finn.
There's part
Wait,
of
I'm
that's
sorry,
like...
but the people out there, if you could have just seen Laura's complete blank,
my jaw
dropped, like truly speechless. Yes.
There's part of me that's like, you should blow that up and frame it.
Oh, please. I wanted to start a thing on Facebook, list your bad review, hashtag bad reviews. Mm-hmm. But no matter what, and so whenever somebody says to me, oh, I got a bad review and I'm like, if it doesn't say, no matter what the program says, so-and-so is not Ava Perón, then I don't want to hear it,
Jamison, I think this is your podcast. I think that it should be no matter what the program says with Jamison Stern, and that you should invite actors to come on and do dramatic readings of their worst reviews.
Oh my God, that is such a good idea.
Nobody's doing it. It's sort of a similar to the bad tweets segment that I think Kimmel does.
Right. Or my friends, Christine Lakin, who's
I'm friends with Christine Lakin too.
Yeah, we did the Breakup Notebook together, the lesbian musical.
Oh my gosh.
And she and oh my God, I can't remember her co-host's name. I'm obsessed with him. He's so brilliant. But they have a podcast called Worst Audition Ever.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and everyone talks about their worst audition experience.
Well, there you go. Like, there are things out there that have, there's also the Mortified stand-up series where people get up and read like journal entries from when they were teenagers and poems they wrote as kids and just like or love letters that they shouldn't have
that's
said.
like Celebrity Autobiography, which I've always wanted to do. So if there's anybody producing Celebrity Autobiography, please let me come read somebody's book.
I'm friends with the producers of Celebrity Autobiography.
Okay, well, great.
So we'll make some connections.
Going to do that.
I really think this would be great because everyone claims not to read the reviews.
Oh, please.
But they do.
It was when I had my big curly hair, so I got they said something like his Peter Frampton hair, and I can't believe I'm admitting to this, and his Paul Lynde voice, which, it was terrible. And so I vowed, first of all, I contemplated, so then I called my dearest friend at the time, Nora May Ling, who passed away a couple of years ago. She's a brilliant comedian, the original woman from Forbidden Broadway and a million Broadway shows. And I called her hysterical, and I said, you have to come over. So she comes over. I hand her this pile of reviews. She reads them, and she looks at me, and she goes, I am so jealous of you. And I said, what are you talking about? She goes, what did you do on that stage to elicit this kind of response?
You think about like the restaurant reviews, like when Guy Fieri's restaurant in Times Square was like the best publicity they could have gotten because the 1-star review from the Times was so bad that it read as satire.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. So anyway, we took the reviews, we put them in a trash can and burned them on the fire escape. But they're still online.
Well, but then you also get headlines like wonderful moments, outstanding performance by Jamison Stern in Fully Committed. Like, that's a headline to frame.
Yeah, yeah.
And Fully Committed, I'm especially fascinated by because, first of all, it's just like a workhorse of a one-man show. How many characters in that script?
33.
And you had a relationship with TheaterWorks in Hartford, right?
Correct.
And you came to them and said, this is a role I've always wanted to do. I think it would work really well in your season. What do you think? And they said, let's do it.
Yeah, basically. I had done it 16 or 17 years prior at the Alley Theater in Houston, where I've done a lot of plays, and they're very good to me there. And Greg Boyd, the artistic director at the time, called and said, do you want to do it? And I said, of course. And he let me pick a director and the whole thing. And then, so, you know, I wanted to work with this particular director, Bill Fennelly, who I adore and who had directed me in Little Shop in Portland and in Cincinnati. And he's from Hartford, so we wanted to do something at TheaterWorks together. But TheaterWorks only does new works. And we were sitting there at dinner. They had come to see me and Georgia McBride, and we were brainstorming. And I said, I still want to do Fully Committed. And then all of a sudden, at the same time, we both realized it had just been on Broadway, so we could sort of consider it new.
Well,
because they rewrote it.
That's right. It was I think the word that David Henry Hwang has used is a revisal.
Nice.
Which is,
yes.
you know, a revision, revival, and especially when the original playwright is involved, which David Henry Hwang did with M. Butterfly, and Becky Mode, who wrote Fully Committed, did for the Jesse Tyler Ferguson revival of Fully Committed.
And they really fleshed it out. They added 12 minutes to it, took it from an hour and 17 to 90 minutes. She really expanded the relationship with the father, and gave Sam a sexual identity, which he didn't have in the first time around.
Sam is a reservationist at a high-end restaurant.
Yes, he's an unemployed actor who is, you know, well into his 30s and not having very much success, and is stuck in the basement of this very fancy restaurant dealing with the worst human beings on the planet. So he plays himself and every single person who calls for a reservation, every person who works in the restaurant who calls down to the basement, and his father and his brother who call to give him a hard time for not coming home for Christmas. And
it's such a perfect role because I feel like every actor can identify with the experience of working in restaurants, and I know that you're no exception.
It's true. It's true. I started out as a busboy when my mother was the waitress when I was 14.
So you started 2 jobs at 14, being an actor and being a waiter.
Yeah.
You got like a decade ahead of schedule for most actors who are also working in restaurants.
It's very true. It's very true. I don't recommend having to be a busboy while your mother is the waitress, though, because you can't say no to anything. You know, and what you were saying earlier about listening, the most fascinating aspect I find to doing Fully Committed is that you can't stop for a minute to think about anything. If you think about what your next line is, you're lost. If you think about why a joke didn't work, you're lost. If you think about why the chair won't swivel, you're lost. And so you really just live each character in the moment, and it's pretty magical.
It sounds terrifying. This is why I stopped acting. That feels like, I mean, I only say this because you're done with it. I wouldn't say this to you if you were still doing it because I'd be afraid of jinxing you. But, like, what happens if you forget your line? Like, what happens if your chair won't move? What happens if you get lost?
Well, I can tell you because it happens. Well, one time I skipped 2 pages and had no idea I had skipped it until I realized I was about to talk about something that hadn't happened yet.
Oh, God.
And I tried to go back, but then I ended up in some sort of vicious circle where I realized I was about to repeat the same scenes over and over again. But we do have...
This is a literal nightmare.
It is an actor's nightmare, but there's a secret weapon, which I had learned from someone who had worked on Jesse's Broadway production, that one of the phones on the desk is a direct line to the stage manager. So...
Brilliant.
It is brilliant. So if you do forget maybe who comes next, you know... you pick up the phone, you click the button, and you say, "Is someone holding, please?" And the stage manager whispers, "It's Mrs. Buxbaum." And you say, "Oh, great, let me just switch you to my Wi-Fi headset." And you click it up, and then you pick up where you left off.
I totally remember seeing that in Jesse's production.
Probably.
I mean, I'm sure it happens all the time.
Yeah. I remember when I also, after I did the show at the Alley, I did it at... La Mirada in California.
And just to pause and say that these are not just random theaters. Like the Alley in Houston is a huge theater, and La Mirada is also really well, like a really well known. I'm lost for the word. You give me all these compliments on being a good interviewer, and I can't come up with the right vocabulary.
Because I'm so intimidated.
But no, it's just like these are really impressive credits.
I've had a very fortunate and blessed, but I have a really enviable regional theater career. Would I rather be sitting at home working in a Broadway show and living in my own apartment? Yes, of course. But I've gotten to play, pretty much almost every role I've ever wanted to play.
That is remarkable.
And, before the advent of social media, I used to say doing regional theater was sort of like when a tree falls in the woods. If no one's there to hear it, did it really make a sound? And that's what my life felt like for a really long time until, honestly, Facebook. And, no one ever knew I was off doing, complete works of Shakespeare abridged, or Invention of Love, or As Bees and Honey Drown.
Or Around the World in 80 Days, or the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, or Title of Show.
Exactly. And all these amazing things. But now you get to, the world gets to hear about it through social media, and it's made a huge difference. Doing it at La Mirada, now I don't remember what I was going to say, but that was in a 1,300-seat theater, so that was a whole different experience for such a tiny little show like Fully Committed. But we did have one day where the phones just stopped working. And, it's just a show about phones ringing.
Right.
And I didn't know what happened.
Just have to pretend they're all on silent.
Right? So I just kept picking up phones and saying, thank you for holding, and keeping it going. And then finally I just stopped. I put everything down and I looked out to the audience and I said, so it's a play about phones and they're not working. So at some point, someone in the back there is going to yell down to us and tell me what's going on. And I expected everyone to laugh and go. They all just thought I was still doing the show. And I looked out and I said, no, really, live theater, everybody. Let's turn up the lights. I'll take some questions, and it was just, and that's what we did for 10 minutes until they got the phones back to working.
I bet people loved that.
Yeah.
I think I never want to see something go wrong to the point where anybody gets hurt. And when something little happens, something where nobody gets hurt, that's why I go to the theater.
It's my favorite thing.
I want to see somebody who randomly sneezes in the middle of their line. I want to see somebody, I want to see a lighting cue not go off and have everybody suddenly, if they've done the show 100 or 1,000 times, some of it is destined to become, or bound to become autopilot.
Of course.
But as soon as the tiniest thing changes, everybody's present in a way. That's another reason I love to see understudies. First of all, I like the opportunity to see somebody new perform a role that I may or may not have seen before. But it's the people around them who do it all the time who are suddenly paying attention to the changes and
listening.
What's new.
They're really listening. Nothing makes me happier than when something gets messed up during a show. I mean, it truly, truly, all the other actors were like, I can't believe that happened. I was like, are you kidding? That was like the best night ever.
So the last thing that I didn't actually get to see you in it, but I saw you at the theater was, what was the play called that you did at the West Side?
Daniel's Husband.
Daniel's Husband, which was another beautiful story about gay love. And didn't you understudy like every role in the play?
It felt like it. I understudied the 3 adult men, yeah.
And those were the leads?
Those were the leads, and they were all always on stage all at the same time talking to each other. So I learned...
Except for one who had an unfortunate incident where...
Yes.
Where it probably harder than talking the whole play, he had to sit there not talking for an entire act.
Yes, exactly. But so I learned it kind of like the way you learn Fully Committed. Just, I couldn't do it as a one-man play. And I would occasionally just sit there and be like, want to hear it?
Did you rehearse yourself?
I did. I mean, it was an interesting experience. I never did get to go on. And so I just sort of spent months, learning it. And
that was also a heartbreaking show.
It was.
Did you have to get extra therapy for a show like that?
Okay. All joking aside, yes. So this play was a beautiful play. The first 20 minutes are hysterically funny, and then it's a drama. And it's heartbreaking. And I would watch it every night, you know. And of course, as an actor watching it and as the understudy, you're kind of living it in your seat and you're feeling it. And it wouldn't matter how many times I'd seen it, I would just sob. And I didn't put it together that it was affecting me so much. And I remember going to my psychiatrist, and I was having all these issues. And, you know, we all take something, you know, we're all on some sort of a medication. And I said, I don't think anything's working. And we switched all these meds around, and because I was so sad and so depressed and all these things going on. And then once I got the show under my belt, I stopped watching and would just hang out in the dressing room. And then I realized it was the show was literally making me sick, like, depressed and sad and going home and crying all the time. And, you know, stage management was like, you know, you need to be up there watching the show. And I was like, I can't. I won't survive. I won't survive. So, yeah, that was a very interesting experience and a beautiful and heartbreaking play.
You know, a friend of mine who has done multiple Broadway shows and is also like a really accomplished author told me that she had a major breakthrough when she realized that her emotions are as much of a muscle as the bodies of a professional dancer or athlete, and that you would never expect somebody who dances 8 shows a week to not do physical therapy.
Right.
And that her emotional therapy was just as crucial and just as much a part of her upkeep as a dancer getting their muscles massaged and stretched out after a show.
That's amazing.
That your body in your neurology doesn't know the difference between anguish you're feeling over an event in your real life versus anguish you're feeling over a role on the stage. And if you have to live this repeating cycle of anguish or terror or whatever else your character is going through, loss, you are going to feel the effects of it same as if somebody you loved, you know, died, or if somebody broke into your house or whatever the thing is.
Your body doesn't know the difference.
That's right. And I can't believe actors who play ongoing roles that are emotionally difficult who aren't in therapy 5 days a week.
I know. I think of Ben Platt, you know, and I think, what must that 2 or 3 years of his life been like? And I mean, he's younger. I've heard him talk about it a little bit, you know, on podcasts, but maybe it was a little bit easier for him. And I don't know what he was drawing upon to get to that place every night. But, you know, you see it. And I think really great actors, you know, bring that stuff home with them or are living it. And I think, you know, I believe that when you hear about movie stars who, you know, fall in love on set, you know, it's so obvious to me that of course that happens because your body doesn't know the difference. And if you're, for lack of a better word, pretending to love someone for, you know, 8 weeks in Budapest while you shoot some spy movie, you're going to fall in love with that person.
That was a very specific reference.
I know, and I completely made it up.
I was going to say, who do we know who's shooting a spy movie in Budapest?
I don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, whatever, but I don't...
Is that filmed in Budapest?
No, but that is what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think about relationships that I know of that have lasted 20, 30, 40 years from people who fall in love on set. And then I know relationships that have happened on sets and then disappeared as soon as that falling in love 8 times a week didn't happen.
Yeah.
It feels dangerous to me.
It is. It scares me. You know, I can't, you know, I can't get any more specific because I do have lots of friends who, you know, have fallen in love and left their relationships and then enter into this new one. And I just hope and pray that, you know, it's a real thing for them. But
well, there's no question that it's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, you know, whether the real life
Goes away when the music stops.
Yeah, I mean, to put it sort of glibly, I mean, it's so funny because this is the second episode in a row where I've ended up talking about relationships more than about like the craft.
Broadway.
But
right.
the fact is, this show is not called Laura Heywood's Broadway Interviews.
Hey,
it's just Laura Heywood Interviews, which means I can talk about whatever I want, and people can opt in or opt out.
That's right. Well,
and,
we are both a couple of single people, right? Are you? Oh, ooh.
We broke the news on my last episode, my interview with Michael Kilgore. No, I'm in a new but serious relationship with someone I've actually known for 3 years.
I'm so thrilled for you.
Thank you. He's wonderful.
Oh my God, I'm so happy and so envious at the same time. It's possible to be happy for someone and envious of them.
Of course, just like it's
it?
possible to be grateful and exhausted.
Right.
And when people are like, you live the most amazing life, like, I wish that I could switch lives with you, I'm like, you better get ready to be real tired if you want to switch lives.
But so you fell in love with a friend. That's my biggest dream.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
All my friends now are cringing if they're listening. They're like, it's not going to be me.
Here's the thing. It was not somebody that I was like super, super close with. We were involved in, like, we were in the same circle. We met at the gym, and we both were positive the other one was unavailable. He thought that I was married, and I thought he was gay. And we didn't hang out enough to ever correct those things.
Right.
But we were Facebook friends, and eventually he figured out that I was never posting about a partner. And I don't know how closely he was looking at my pictures, but like, I don't wear a ring.
Right.
And he reached out to me on Thanksgiving and was like, when you're back in town, like, we should hang out. How come we don't hang out more? And I was like, oh yeah, I have extra tickets to a show the day I get back. Like, come meet me, which tends to be my go-to for like when somebody says, let's hang out, because I don't have very much free time, but I do often have extra tickets to
That's how you and I spend time together.
I know, yeah. Come to the show with me. And so he met me at the show, and we went to see Jagged Little Pill. And I can't believe I'm telling this story publicly. And he's definitely listening right now.
Well, hey, if it's not as bad as no matter what the program says,
oh no,
you're
it's
good.
great. It's great. It's just it's just personal, and you know, it's magical. But it also, like, if I wasn't in it, I'd probably make me want to barf. So please don't
Go ahead,
barf.
make me barf.
Okay.
I want to.
So we're sitting at Jagged Little Pill, and I realized that he's hogging the armrest, which is one of my biggest theater pet peeves. Like, after somebody texting or, you know, like singing along, probably my biggest pet peeve is somebody who takes up the entire armrest. And I was like, that's weird. Why isn't it bothering me? And I realized that it was because, like, I could feel this electricity along the side of my arm where his arm was touching mine. And I was like, that's weird. Is this one of those times where I get a crush on one of my gay friends? Oh, God. And then after intermission, I said to him, knowing that the play was going to get, or the musical was going to get really emotional, I was like, if this show gets really emotional, I'm going to have to, like, grab your arm. And he just immediately picked up his arm and put mine around his. And of course, I think I sit with my, like, clutching arms with friends at the theater all the time. But he took his other hand and he put it on my knee. And I was like, oh, is this happening? And then I took this was all over the course of an entire act of the show. I took my other hand and I put it on top of his hand on my knee. And so then we were holding hands. And by the end of Act 2, I had, like, slid down in my chair, had my head on his shoulder, and he was, like, touching my hair as we were watching this incredibly beautiful musical. And afterwards, we barely said anything after the show ended. We did briefly pause to pick up discarded sippy cups off the floor, which is, like, the thing that I always do. I always want to take home all the extra cups. And
I don't understand how people leave those behind. They cost $37.
I know. And so I collect them and I actually send them out to kids all over the country who can't get to the theater as, like, a way of sort of saving the world, saving the earth, and spreading joy at the same time. And so the fact that he was
put a pin in that, because that's amazing. I want to talk about that.
I mean, it's turning into you interviewing me now. Sorry to that one person who wrote a bad review on my podcast. But if you'd like to write a good review, ratethispodcast.com/Laura. Anyway, so the fact that he was excited to be like, oh, there's cups over here, was also a very good sign. But other than that, we barely said anything. We walked out of the theater. It was pouring rain. Everybody was packed into, like, right under the awning. We both, without even saying anything, ran across the street where there was a scaffolding and not a crowd. And we both kind of made eye contact and went, what is happening right now? Is this? Nobody completed a sentence. and he just grabbed me and kissed me. And it was like the greatest kiss of my life.
Oh my God.
And that was it. Like 2 days later, we were like, want to be monogamous?
I'm so happy
yeah. So it's
for
it's
you.
new, but it's also like we're both in our 40s, and we were like, I don't know, I've been waiting for this my whole life. So me too. Let's just like dive in and do it. Like this is it.
Amazing.
So,
oh my God, I love that.
So sorry, not single anymore, but not sorry at
All right, well,
because-
I am. So call in right now if you're. Oh wait, we're not taking call. Okay.
I think the important thing was that he and I have both just spent a lot of time doing work on ourselves. And we both had been like, you know, we both were we're interested in finding somebody if that made sense. But if it wasn't right, we were also fine just continuing to do work on ourselves and becoming the best self-contained, self-sufficient people we could.
Yeah.
And so we're both incredibly self-aware, and and that led us to each other, I think. And if only one of us had done that work, we wouldn't have been ready.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yay.
I hope I don't have to
Apologize to him for this podcast.
Oh no,
and everything?
he will not mind.
Yeah.
I think he'll be excited that
Good.
we talked about it. Especially because
Well, I can't wait till this is over.
Oh,
and
actually, I
find out
did
who
just
he is.
post a picture of him on Instagram. So
Okay.
anybody who wants to know, Broadway Girl NYC. I hope that, I don't know, like I like to say that the best compliment I can get about this show is that it's just two friends catching up and people happen to get to listen in. And I hope that that's what this has come across as, and not just me being totally self-indulgent.
No, and those are some of my favorite podcasts. I mean, again, I've been listening to podcasts for so many years before they were a thing. And, there used to be podcasts. I remember one, it was called like Two Girls, Two Glasses of Wine. I don't remember, or something like that. And it was just...
As long as it wasn't Two Girls, One Cup.
Google that, people.
Nope.
Don't do it. You'll regret it for the rest of your life.
I don't think you can find it anymore.
You'll never be able to unsee it. And it was just friends sitting around talking and drinking. Those have sort of gone by the wayside, and now there's, everybody has a point of view. A brand and a point of view, but that's important. And I think you have to have a point of view. And I think if you're going to put yourself out there, hopefully it's to educate people and possibly just to make the world a better place a little bit. Unless you're interviewing famous people and that's your thing, like Mark Moran. But even he has an incredible point of view.
I wasn't going to correct you the first time, but
Maron. Oh, my God.
Mark Maron.
Mark Maron. Thank you.
And the fact that you put me in the same sentence as Dax Shepard and Mark Maron as an interviewer is pretty remarkable.
Well,
like they're up there with my heroes. Probably my two number one and number two, I guess. Interviewing inspirations are Howard Stern and Terry Gross.
Oh, God, yeah, of
and
course.
they're in more traditional formats, but although describing Howard Stern as traditional is pretty silly, but, in terms of radio. And in podcasting, Dax and Mark are way up there.
Dax is incredible.
Yeah.
Who would know? He's so good, and he's so honest. He's honest to a fault, and he relates to everybody, and he's incredibly kind. I don't know. I don't even know him, obviously, but his podcast is amazing.
Plus, he has the cutest wife ever.
He does.
Kristen Bell.
He does. And a really cute co-host. She's adorable.
Who's his co-host?
Monica Padman.
Oh, I don't know her.
Yeah, she's adorable. They're the closest of friends. She started out as sort of their kind of like a babysitter, nanny type person, and now she produces his thing, and she's won an Emmy for something for writing. So
Was
she
it
and
a
I
real
have a lot.
Emmy or one of those fake Emmys?
So we have a lot in common.
So I want to make sure everybody knows where to find you, because I think once people make the connection of your face and your name, they're going to start seeing you everywhere because you're everywhere. You work so much, and while you're not necessarily a household name yet, you're one of those actors who just is constantly working. So people can follow along and find out where to see you next on both Twitter and Instagram at Jamison Stern.
Yes.
And Jamison with an I.
Yes.
And I remember that because Because you're called Jamie, Boohoo Jamie, and Jami is
Yeah, well, it came from my father's middle name was James, so they decided to name me Jamison. Mind you, I'm Jewish, so it's the waspiest name in the world, Jamison Brooks Stern. I don't know how it happened, but my mom was like, yes, name him Jamison, but not after the booze. So it's Jami. And yes, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. It's just a shame, but it's kind of important for us as actors to boost our following. And if you watch After Forever, which I hope you do, and if you love it, which I hope you do, my producers have asked you to please leave a review at Amazon because it makes a huge difference for us and for the prospects of season 3, which we all want to do.
Yeah.
Which is, I might have already read it, but
oh, okay. So it's just a question of making sure that the audience is there to get it produced. So okay, I'll tell you what. You want to do a review for Review Trade?
Oh my God!
I'll go write a good review for After Forever, and you go write a good review for Laura Heywood Interviews.
Absolutely.
Both will be completely honest because we love each other's work, and maybe other people will do the same.
We would love that.
Also, if you follow Jamison on Instagram, you can see fun stories like the time he showed up for an audition a week early.
This was just the other day.
That's
Literally
the latest Instagram
showed
post.
up and had an argument with the doorman. Like, no, you have to let me up. He was like, there's nothing in here. I'm like, I'm already 15 minutes late, sir. And then I opened up the email and I just realized what it said, and I just looked at him and I said, okay, I'll just see you next week. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh,
and you get to
so
watch my
fun.
dog and my fish.
Yeah.
My fish tank called Columbus Avenue Sushi, and Huckleberry. My dog. I named my dog after my worst review ever.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, which I didn't really put together till just now.
If he ever has an accident, you can be like, no matter what the program says,
Right.
you're not a good dog.
Exactly. Clean up your own poop.
Well, we are at time. I'm so happy you came in. I mean, it's fun to interview celebrities, but I kind of like it better when I just get to hang out with my friends.
Thank you.
And
In my mind, I'm a celebrity.
Well, you're on your way, my friend.
Thank you.
This has been Laura Heywood Interviews. Please leave a review at ratethispodcast.com/Laura. And I'll be back in just a couple of days with another episode. Thanks so much.